Hey guys, so I'm just going to take you through my creative response to Gattaca. I want to help you to understand the connection between your statement of authorial intent and a creative response. So I've written a short story about Vincent Freeman. It's not the best short story that's ever been written, but it does sort of fit the brief of what you need to do. So it highlights a point in Vincent's life that helped him to become the person that we see in the film. And that's what you guys will be doing in your SAC. Obviously, yours could look very, very different to what I've done. It's really important that you understand that by me providing you with an example of what to do, I'm not saying this is exactly how you have to do it. You might decide to write in a first-person narrative. You might, of course, decide to write about Michelle Payne rather than Vincent Freeman. You might decide to write from Vincent Freeman's perspective rather than writing in the third person as I've done. It's totally up to you, and of course you will already have your drafts completed. Just remember, your draft is a draft for a reason. I expect it to change over the next few days as you prepare for your SAC next week. So just making sure that you see your draft as an active document. It's not something that, I did this draft on Saturday and now I'm ready for the SAC. It should be constantly changing, because as you reread your own work, you start to get an understanding of how things can be made better. And that's what I'd really like you to get in the habit of doing with English. Your first draft of anything in English should never, ever be your last draft. It doesn't give you not nearly enough time to improve your work. Okay, so I'm going to start off just by going through my statement of intent, and I will try to connect that with some of the things that I've done in my story. So, of course, what I've done, you can see I've highlighted the different areas of my statement of intent, so form, audience, purpose, language, and context. I really just want to make it very clear to you that form and audience here take up really a very tiny section of my statement. So form up the top here, and then one sentence for my audience as well. If I was writing an essay, I might have a little bit more information on audience and perhaps a persuasive essay or an informative essay. But as a creative piece, really, our statement of who our audience is should all be very much the same. This short story is directed at those who have seen the film Gattaca or Ride Like a Girl, as it explores a section of the story which is not covered in the film. Now, yours might look a little bit differently to that, but really, you would write one sentence explaining that piece of information. And your form as well. Keep in mind, I've given you a fairly specific brief to follow for your SAC, just to make it easier for you. So you don't really need to take a long time to describe the form you're writing in, because we're all writing in the same form. So a creative short story is really all you need to say. It sounds simple, but it must be said. You need to get in the habit of providing all the information needed for someone to understand your piece of writing, so what you're writing. And when you go to year 12, you may find you'll have more freedom with your creative response. I've obviously kept it fairly restricted with the form of a short story for your own benefit. But in year 12, you may have a little bit more freedom with that. So you would need to clarify exactly what form you've decided to write in. So I've written a creative short story that illustrates my understanding of the character Vincent Freeman in Gattaca and continues to explore the theme of human determination versus genetic makeup that is shown in the film. So this is part of my purpose. I've started with purpose because I want to make it really clear who the character is that I'm following, or who the character is that I'm writing about. And what the theme is that I'm exploring. Now, I really recommend that you include the word theme in your statement of intent. In fact, it's necessary. I recommend that you explain the theme that you are exploring at the very beginning of your statement of intent. It makes it very clear to your assessor that you understand the purpose of the creative response. The purpose of the creative response is not to show me how well you write a short story, okay? That's not what I'm assessing. What I'm assessing is your understanding of the text through the medium of creative response. So rather than through writing an essay, this is through the medium of creative response. I'm still focusing on your understanding of the text. So I really recommend that you mention who is the character that you're following in your story or that you're writing about, and what is the theme that you are exploring. So I've done that in the very first sentence of my statement of intent. I recommend that you do a similar thing. I've included my sentence about audience, and then I've very quickly sort of said what language I'm using. So my story is written in the third person. And then I've given context. So focuses on Vincent's brief meeting with another invalid, Mel, after he leaves his family home to pursue his dreams in the city. Their conversation makes Vincent realize he is different from other invalids, which is what spurs him on to achieve his goal of going to space. So I've done this in my short story, really at the sort of very end. Mel is sort of the one that offloads this information onto Vincent by sort of saying, here, Vincent, I'm going to talk to you pretty bluntly because I've only just met you. I'm assuming I won't see you again. So I wanted this other character to give Vincent insight into himself, things that he would not know as a young 18-year-old leaving his home for the first time. I can imagine he'd be pretty ignorant of the world. He'd still be learning about himself. He knows how people are treated as invalids, but learning about that in your family home and then moving to a city where you're faced with discrimination every day is a very different thing. And so Mel sort of gives him some hard truths before he goes into the city, because I believe Vincent would have needed at some point to have heard this information before he decided, I'm going to sacrifice everything in the pursuit of Gattaca. I imagine, as someone who knows the character of Vincent, I imagine that he would think that. He'd think, I'm willing to sacrifice everything, but he wouldn't actually know what that means. And I think when I've written the character of Mel, her last line, I think, has highlighted that quite well. So honestly, Vincent, I don't have it in me to make the kind of sacrifices you'll have to make to get what you want. So this is a character who's a bit older than Vincent, who understands the world a little bit better than Vincent. She is sort of sadly, so she smiles sadly and then says, I don't have it in me to make the kind of sacrifices you'll have to make. She understands the extent that he'll have to go to challenge society, and she's trying to encourage him. So she sees that he has the ability to do it. She says up here, but I think you've got it, Vincent. You've got the thing, the determination to succeed. I reckon you've got a good chance. So she believes that there is something more than genetic makeup that pushes us to succeed. There is human determination. She knows she doesn't have it. So she, even though Vincent has this sort of passion and wants her to come with him and says, look, come with me. We'll help each other. It'll be great. She realizes, she already knows that she doesn't have what Vincent has, and he doesn't understand that. So I think he doesn't quite see already the difference between him and other invalids, that it's not necessarily an option open to all invalids to question society, but she believes it's open to him. So I've also talked about language a little bit more. So I've attempted to capture the character of Vincent by mirroring some of his traits we see in the film. Now, I really recommend that as a sentence to use in your statement of intent, because you're connecting. The more you connect your short story with the film, the better your description will be, and the better your statement of intent will sound. It'll tell me that you actually understand what the film is showing us. So I've said, Vincent, he's private, he's frustrated, and he does not trust people easily. I can say this because obviously I've seen Gattaca and I know that those are some of his character traits. I've tried to capture that moment of his life by having him speak of his dream in a starry-eyed, fervent manner, as he does not yet realize the kind of sacrifices he will need to make in order to get into Gattaca. Now, I can extrapolate, so I can sort of build my own understanding of his character based on what I know in the film. So maybe he wasn't like this when he left his family home. Maybe he was already very jaded and bitter about the world, and he wasn't ignorant. Maybe he knew everything. But I think it is believable that as an 18-year-old boy leaving his family home, he would have his determination, his frustration, his pent-up anger about his situation. But I don't think he would yet understand fully what would need to be done to get where he wanted to go. So I think and I've tried to explain briefly in my statement of intent that I've done a good job of recreating the voice of Vincent and the character of Vincent in my story. So that is something you'll need to do in your statement of intent. You need to justify your creation of the character. I've then moved on back again to purpose. So I created the character of Mel to juxtapose, so to basically put against. So when you're, I guess, comparing two different characters. So to juxtapose Vincent's passion with someone who lacks passion, but is content with what they have. Now, part of Vincent's character is his selfishness, which enables him to get what he wants. So again, that's another explanation of my understanding of the character. And I wanted to show that, I wanted to illustrate that in my short story. I flick across back to some context. So Mel explains to Vincent that although she was angry with her lot in life, she's not willing to sacrifice her family or comfort to change things. So that's just a very brief little bit of summary of what I say in my short story, and how she explains what happened to her and why she was an invalid, and that it was sort of out of her control and she's frustrated, but she has had the time and the experience to weigh up the things that she would have to sacrifice in order to change her situation, and she's not willing to do that. Now I end by talking about purpose. Highly recommend that purpose is the main part, so that's these pink areas, that you focus on purpose, you focus on language, and you have a fair amount of context. Audience and form should really not take longer than a sentence or two. That's pretty much it. Purpose, language, and context should build up the bulk of your statement of intent. So I finished by saying I wanted to show how different Vincent is from other invalids, and in this way suggesting that Vincent is in fact a valid, not because of his genetic makeup, but because his determination to succeed would not allow him to fail. Now you can see my last line connects very strongly with the theme that I said that I would explore at the beginning of my statement. I highly recommend that you connect your idea from the beginning of your statement of intent. Why are you writing this story? I'm exploring the theme of human determination versus genetic makeup. I really recommend that you reconnect that idea at the end of your statement. So you restate it. So in this way suggesting that Vincent is in fact a valid, not because of his genetic makeup, but because his determination to succeed would not allow him to fail. So I've done that. I've connected those two ideas together and neatly summed up my creative response and my understanding of the text that is shown through my creative response. So yeah, I hope that this has been helpful looking through. I recommend that you read through the story at your own pace. There's an audio recording on Schoology as well for you if you'd prefer to listen. But basically have a read through and see how I've tried to use language, body language, vocal language to recreate the character of Vincent in my own story. Now, maybe I've done a good job, maybe I've done a bad job. I think that I've justified my character in my statement of intent, and that's really the most important thing. Okay? Cool, good luck, and please email me with any questions. Do not wait till it's too late to do that.